let me tell you that just now I got the news that Russia has expelled, some moments ago, 7 diplomats from Slovakia, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Maybe they were listening to this debate and they took some measures about it. So as you see, the confrontation continues. And I would like to try to answer some specific issues that you have raised, but at the same time to go a little bit above and to have a look at the general approach that we have to follow with Russia in the coming new geopolitical landscape. After listening to all of you, I think that we agree, or most of you agree, on the fact that we are going to face a long and hard period of political confrontation with Russia. And we must prepare for that. I think this is an undeniable reality, because Russia now is convinced that its confrontation with Europe, in general with the West, Europe, United States, is the surest way to reinforce the legitimacy of the Russian power. Have a look at the speech of President Putin, the last day, his message to the nation and Duma. Have a look at the part related with foreign policy, and you will see clearly how it is the way I am saying that the confrontation with the West is part of the reinforcement of their legitimacy towards the interior. On the other hand, it says that the defense of human rights, or when we require them about human rights issue, for them is an existential threat. And when I went to Moscow, and I explained clearly in front of them that, sorry, you signed a convention of the human rights of the Council of Europe. Me too. We are partners in this convention, and we have the right to analyze and follow how do you fulfill this obligation that you signed. But for them, it's an existential threat because it is a regime with a very weak economic performance, mediocre, would say, and the prospects for them are not good. And climate change, and the answer to climate change, especially coming from us with our climate plans, will make it more difficult. Yes, they have a strong military power, and they use it, and they deploy it when needed. Syria, even Libya, Caucasus, and they have a real technological potential. But economically speaking, Russia is the size of Italy, not much more than Spain. They have also the energy weapon. Many of you have been talking about it related to Nord Stream. I will say something about it. It's very much present in the relationship between Russia and Europe, the energy question. And it plays an important role for their future, because Russia c'est une rentier economy. C'est l'économie de la rente, l'exploitation des ressources naturelles. Sans ça, il serait vraiment un problème. Ils sont déjà un problème. Et le Green Deal, as I was saying, will increase these problems. This is why the Russian power is engaged in a spiral in which internal repression plays an important role. With respect to Belarus, have a look at the recent visit of Lukashenko to Moscow, and you will learn about the relationship between Moscow and Belarus. I don't want to use words that can create alarm, but it's clear that the main lesson that we can take about the situation in Belarus comes from the visit of Lukashenko to Moscow. About Ukraine, Russia is not only aiming at increasing its military intimidation, not only military intimidation, but on the political level is moving further, saying that the Ukrainian conflict, many of you have been mentioning it, does not concern Russia. Oh my God, what do we have to do with the Ukrainian conflict? And even more that the Minsk agreement was just a signature to look for a temporary solution, but it's nothing more than that. This is something that Moscow starts saying openly, and they present themselves as a mediator in a conflict in which they are not part. All in all, it creates a dynamic. And Russia is probably engaging on the way of a strategic alliance with China, with three objectives in mind. First, to reduce its technological and economic dependency on the West. If you talk with the European firms which are investing in Russia, they will tell you the the Chinese technological standards are winning the battle. More and more, it is the Chinese technology who is taking the market against us. Even if this leaning toward China will eventually make Russia dependent on this big country, for them, they need an alternative to look for outlets in terms of energy. If we are not buying so much amount of gas and oil, who will buy it? There is no one else big enough in order to replace us. Yes, there is a lot of infrastructure to be built in order to transport this energy, but this alliance with Beijing, it's, among other things, a way of looking for someone else interested in burning gas and oil from Russia. And these alliances with Beijing will profoundly modify the international language on human rights and favor a sovereignty vision of the international relations, which will have considerable implications, in particular for the management of the net and the energy policy, the world energy policy, the geopolitical of energy. And this is something that we have to keep in mind when we talk about our relation with Russia. We want to understand really what is at stake. Mr. Putin has been saying clearly that they will, they have been officially recognizing the use of instruments of asymmetric action. And we know very well how these asymmetric actions are being performed through espionage and cyber attacks, and to support the forces ultra-conservative and practicing disinformation. This is the landscape, and in face of this landscape, we have no other solution than to stick to the line that I propose and sensitize on using these three verbs that I would like to repeat as many times as needed in order to create a certain way of understanding the problem. To contain, to push back, and engage. To push back and prevent Russia from crossing red lines, especially when the sovereignty of the European states are at stake. We seen recently about the Czech Republic. Contain, we must support all of those who are the object of Russian pressure, and I think particularly countries on the Eastern Partnership. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't prevent from having to engage, because it's the third pillar. Because Russia exists, and that there are files in which we have an interest to work with it, Iran or climate change. By the way, listen of the leaks about the conversation of the Iranian Minister Zarif, where it appears clear that Russia was trying to put obstacles to the negotiations on JCPOA, trying to prevent from this agreement to be reached. Listen to these leaks. They are very, very clear about what happened that time that what can happen now. But we have to count on Russia about the Iranian nuclear deal. It's part of it. But this strategy of pushing back, containing, and engaging will only succeed if we fulfill two essential conditions. The first one is that member states remain solidly united and avoid free riding on Moscow when Moscow tries to divide us. Only if member states take a firm position when it comes to Brussels and go back to their capitals, we will be able to face Russia. And Butikhofer has said that, and I agree with him when he says that, well, it is in the capitals where we can have the stronger responsibility about the policy towards Russia. Because here, the European Union, we try to build a common foreign policy, but foreign policy, like it or not, remains according with the treaty an exclusive competence of the member states. And the fact that you here, the European Parliament, talk with me, High Representative, about how to deal with Russia, doesn't make to disappear the basic principle of the foreign policy belonging to the member states. And I have to make them agree. And if they don't agree, well, then we don't have a policy. Thank you to Mr. Butikhofer for remembering that at the end, we have to look also to the member states. It means to the governments of the countries that you represent here. If they take a firm position in Brussels and then they go back to their capitals and forget about their commitments and do free riding on the relationship with Russia, it's very difficult to have a common policy. And if we don't have a common policy, then the European Union doesn't have the tools in order to do the job that you're asking me to do. And this has some relationship, for sure, with Nord Stream that has been mentioned here several times. The second condition, and I want to stress it also, is that the countries of the Eastern Partnership, which we help to face the Russian pressure, must imperatively reform themselves. They need to use our help and our support, not as a rent, but as an instrument for more internal reforms. Yes, they are suffering the Russian pressure. The best way of facing this pressure is reforming, becoming fully democratic countries in order to build an economic prosperity and a coherent society in freedom, with our support. It is the best way of supporting the Russian pressure. And it is why we have to condition our support, big support. I don't think they don't deserve it, but as always, this support has to produce results. And we have to be very much exigent in order to be sure that our policy of supporting is well oriented to the results that we require, and for sure, they require also. About some details, questions like the use of SHIFT. Well, SHIFT is an international organization, a private international organization in which the European Union has no power. We should be together with a lot of other people in order to be able to influence the decision about SHIFT. Sanctions to the oligarchs. I would like very much to have a reason that can be legally supported. But our instruments, the last one, the human rights instrument that we approve and we have been using for the first time against Russia and China, doesn't consider corruption among one of the reasons to be employed. Sorry, that's what we have approved. And about Nord Stream, that many of you have been mentioning, yes, it's a controversial infrastructure. And the European Commission has already said that this infrastructure doesn't lead to diversify the energy sources of the European Union. which is one of the objectives of our energy union. But it's a private endeavor. The European Union has not means and tools to decide what to do with Nord Stream 2. It's a matter of private firms, and it's a matter of the Germans. What we can do when Nord Stream starts operating, if it does, is to require that they will be working in a non-discriminatory and in a transparent way with an adequate degree of regulatory oversight in line with the key principles of international and European Union energy law. I want to remember you that the gas directive that entered into force a couple of years ago, on May 2019, gives the Union the competence to apply the European Union energy law on all interconnection from third countries. And this is what we are going to do. But at the same time, don't ask me to support the American sanctions against the firms that are building Nord Stream 2. I am against the extraterritorial sanctions imposed by the EU, by the United States, everywhere. I cannot be depending on the color of the people affected to be in favor or against it. We have to keep coherence. Well, this is some reflections about what you have been saying during this long exchange of views. To summarize, we must continue refuting Russia's attempt to portray itself as a mediator in Ukraine, and we must continue passing strong messages about the three issues that we have been discussing today. With regard to the Navalny case, let me say that there is a place in which we can do something. It's the Council of Europe. In the Council of Europe, something can be done, more than here. Look, European Union members are members of the Council of Europe, and nobody has been going to Estrasbourg Court on human rights, nobody as often as Navalny, and rarely had this system of collective human rights protection been as modest on the answer. And that's important to take into consideration that. Because Navalny went to the court 20 times. He has been detained, 10-month house arrest, twice sentenced for corruption in fake trials. And every time, the European Court of Human Rights has been ruling in his favor. He has been attacked 3 times, the last one with Novichok, and no real action has been taken. And I think that the Council of Europe could do more, because this is a democratic place where democracies sit around. Russia is part of this assembly. And I think that clear decisions from the European Court of Human Rights can help to face this problem, the issue of Mr. Navalny. Well, we will have to continue talking about Russia. I want to insist that the verb engage is part of these 3 verbs, and that we have a lot of work to do in order to create unity among us, to impose reforms in the eastern border countries, and to maintain with Russia the dialogue needed in order to work together in issues in which we need to work together. I don't have any kind of interest on escalating against Russia. We don't need to escalate. We need just to keep firm in defending our principles using the tools and means that we have. But please, look for solutions in the member states' capitals also. Don't believe that everything can be decided here by me, by the European Commission, or by the European Parliament. Because foreign policy is something that today still is a matter of member states. Help me to build a common foreign policy towards Russia. Thank you.
Ganz herzlichen Dank, Herr Vizepräsident. Damit ist die Aussprache geschlossen. Die Abstimmung findet morgen statt. Und wir kommen zum nächsten Punkt auf unserer